So, if you clicked onto this video, you probably already know what you're in for. If you don't, here's a quick 15-second introduction. A while ago, don't ask me when, a Twitter post went fairly viral calling this song the, quote, worst dubstep ever made, gaining the original video on YouTube quite a lot of sudden attention. And of course, the OP of this wonderful track comes from the Geometry Dash community, which I was and still am pretty involved in. And as someone who was also currently studying at one of these schools, I won't reveal which one, when I saw this comment while scrolling across the comment sections of the original video, I couldn't resist it. I had to do it, like, come on. So here we are. Now, generally, when analyzing the music we do, we go along... Now, generally, when analyzing the music that we do, we go on along... Now, generally, when analyzing the music we do, we go along the lines of assuming that every single element within the music is perfectly intentional, and then we start kind of unpicking why everything is the way it is. But since I have a feeling that not all of this went exactly how kind of OP intended it to, I'll instead be focusing on trying to figure out the process of which the song was made, and why that led to certain bits sounding kind of awkward, and certain other bits actually getting pretty close to sounding pretty good. Here's a quick disclaimer. So, starting with the very beginning, aka the introduction section, all we really hear is two notes, right? We hear an F sharp, and we hear a G. And they alternate between each other every bar, and this is what it looks like. I've notated it out on sheet music for you guys. Now, obviously, this doesn't ground it in any specific key because, well, it's two notes. That would be like asking someone, hey, what was that country with, you know, the really good food again? It's not an answerable question. We need more context. Luckily, that is exactly what we're given just a few seconds later. Amidst the repeating, you know, that thing, we are given a new note, the C. This is what it looks like when notated. Now, even though this makes it pretty obvious that our tonal center is in C, we still don't know what scale we're using, because, well, C, F sharp, and G, quite frankly, first of all, there's still three notes, and it's also quite an unusual combination. Is my phone slipping? C, F sharp, and G is quite an unusual combination. You know, are we in C Lydian? Are we in C octatonic? It could be anything, right? Luckily, again, we figured this out towards the pre-drop, which gives us an unambiguous C minor chord in the synth pad underneath everything. This is what it looks like. This puts us very interestingly in the Hungarian scale, which is, you know, actually pretty unusual for an EDM track, so hey, you know, props to this guy. But hang on a second, what's going on with the percussion? Why does everything just feel a little bit off? Do you know what? Let's turn this into a bit of a game. I'm gonna give you the sliding score for the which is consistently in 4 beats. What I want you to try to do is try tapping along to the rhythm. Just, you know, try, whether with your finger snapping or like drumming against your lap, anything, right? And just see if you can notice whether or not the snare drum lands on the beat, before the beat, or after the beat. Ready? Go. So, it turns out that this person, instead of having their snare drum hit precisely on the beat, somehow shifted his entire line 1 semiquaver early. So then you end up with a beat that, as one of the comments under the original video very cleverly puts it, sounds like it's arguing with itself. Not great. But hey, look, I can't criticize this too much, because mistakes do happen, right? And I've done stuff like this. Anyone who's made music probably has done stuff like this. You know, it is what it is. It is what it is. Unfortunately, the whole weird rhythm situation, it doesn't really end there. If we listen closely to the repeating C in the bass of this section, it sounds like, okay, keyword sounds like, I'm saying this because I can't really hear it properly, but it sounds like he's doing a 4 against 3 polyrhythm here. What that means is we've got 3 subdivisions of the beat on one hand, and 4 subdivisions of that same beat at the same speed on the other hand. One, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1. Now, this has the potential to sound pretty catchy when it's done relatively slowly. But when it's done at this speed, it starts sounding chaotic and a little bit muddy. This is what it looks like in notation. By the way, this isn't really a theory thing, but I just thought it would be interesting. You know that snare drum in the pre-drop? Yeah, it's the hit marker sound effect. Yeah, the Call of Duty hit marker sound effect. Just thought it would be interesting. Anyways, I know you guys have all been waiting for me to talk about the actual drop itself, so here we go. Alright, so to be honest with you, up until I was doing research for this video, I didn't really know that much about EDM specifically, but what I am good at is listening out for patterns, structures, and noticing similarities between songs. And after comparing this to a lot of other songs by a lot of other artists that try to go for a similar aesthetic, example, I think there are 3 major talking points when it comes to what makes the drop, like, quote-unquote, bad. Firstly, let's have a look at texture, aka how the different elements in any given moment interact with each other. I think we could all agree that this, you know, it sounds pretty empty compared to something like this, or this, or this. And there's a reason for that. It's because a lot of the time, songs like these are built with one really powerful lead element, and lots of tiny little layers underneath that give it its fuller texture. And a lot of the time you don't really notice these tiny little layers when you're listening to the song, but those layers are like the foundation for the entire thing. Take them away, and you end up with something that sounds sparse and awkward. In this section of X-Driller's Tria, for example. You probably noticed the lead synth that plays the melody, and the really heavy, you know, the thing in the background that goes like bwah, bwah, bwah. Okay, I'm so sorry, but I'm really not good enough at EDM to be able to tell you what I should be calling that sound, but you get the point, okay? Those are the lead elements. But in the background, you also hear synth strings playing chords with some wet reverb, which in isolation sounds like this. Now, if we look at Green Apple's drop again, there are gaps between the you know, that thing, where you just don't hear anything. No chords, no percussion, not even enough reverb to fill the space with the residue of whatever came before it. It's just empty silence. Secondly, I want to talk about rhythm. So what happens here, funnily enough, is exactly what happened in the first half. Pay attention to the snare drums in the drop. I'm gonna put, like, a drum emoji on the screen every single time it sounds, just so that, you know, like... I'm gonna put, like, a drum emoji on the screen every single time it sounds, just so that, you know, like, you can keep up with it a little bit easier. Okay, pause. This is my mistake for not realizing this earlier, but my excuse is that the snare is just so disorienting that I had completely missed this. I'm gonna hold your hand when I say this. It's not just the snare. Everything is off. But okay, I know you guys wanted me to actually figure out what's going on here, so let's give this a shot. All right? I'm gonna put a metronome over the track. Let's assume that this sound marks the beginning of a new bar, because that's usually how it goes, and we'll try to count in whatever number we get to from there. Okay, so in all honesty, what I think went wrong is that this guy didn't actually make these sounds himself. What it sounds like, I'm not saying this is absolutely the case, but what it sounds like is that this person started digging through samples on whatever software he uses, GarageBand, Ableton, I don't know, right? And then he smushes them together, and you know how these softwares usually have lines that tell you where the beat lands? I think he dragged the clip and snapped it onto the grid, not knowing that the sample is not the same as a MIDI clip, leading to almost everything in the drop to be offbeat. As to why he didn't listen through to it and check it before uploading, well, who knows. Maybe he was in a rush. Maybe he was using the software on a school computer or something like that, and he was about to get kicked out of the classroom, or, you know, I don't know. Anyways, as a final point, I want to talk about Unity. And no, I don't mean the 3D software. Now, this is a massive thing in music, a massive, massive thing. But instead of getting all academic and boring about it, let me paint a scenario for you. You're going to watch, say, a rom-com. You got these two characters going on wholesome dates together, having all sorts of cute moments, chasing each other across the park, stumbling over each other on a dance floor, and all of a sudden, boom! Jump scare, main character gets a 50 cal bullet from a sniper straight into his head, and then he explodes right in the middle of a peaceful restaurant scene, and the other main character, how do they react? They become a vigilante, and they spend the rest of the movie training themselves half to death so that they can one day get their revenge on whoever it was that killed their date. Now, I'm sure most of you would be going, whoa, like where the hell did that come from? You know? And that would be a perfectly valid reaction, because nothing up until that point had been pointing towards that outcome. Now, let's imagine that same scenario, but except I tweaked the plot a little bit. The movie begins. You have, again, these two characters going on dates, and one of them is really enjoying it. The others, well, they're a bit uneasy, because, as we later learn, they've just changed their identity. They're on the run from a gang, or something like that, which they've made an enemy out of. Throughout their dates, there's constant foreshadowing that someone's watching them, or indicators that something's not quite right. All of that stuff. Now, in this scenario, when the moment of the assassination finally hits, the audience goes, okay, there we go. That's what the plot has been building up to this entire time. It feels so much more deserved. Now, the exact same thing applies to music. Even within a genre where artists are famous for getting to a beat drop within 30 seconds of their song, there's usually at least still some level of unity. A feature within the music that ties the intro to the pre-drop, to the drop, to the after-drop, whether that be the sound of a specific instrument, or a repeating melody, or even just the general vibe, there's usually something. And in this case, the pre-drop, unfortunately, has almost nothing to do with the drop. Now, to be clear, I can't criticize Shotgun 99 too much for this, because I find this to be a problem even within the works of a lot of mainstream EDM artists. So, I don't know, maybe it comes down to a matter of personal taste, maybe I'm just overthinking it. But the fact of the matter is, a large proportion of consumers like it when they can spot any type of unity within a song, even if it's so subtle that you're not even consciously aware of it, because it makes the climax feel so much more deserved, and it gives the entire song its own unique identity. Without that, it's kinda just a mix and match of random sounds put together. Like, why does this drop belong to this pre-drop? Can I swap in a different drop with the same pre-drop and have it still sound just as good? If the answer is yes, you probably don't have a very strong piece of music. Alright, that is pretty much everything I have for you today. Honestly, this took so much time to make. I do not plan on doing these regularly, but this one seemed fun and people wanted it, so hey, here it is. Hope you enjoyed. I'm not going to ask you guys to subscribe because it implies that I'd be doing this kind of thing regularly, which I'm not. But do consider leaving a like if you found this entertaining or informative. Alright, bye.